Entrepreneurship is not a job, it's a lifestyle. And I think it's very important to assess what type of lifestyle you want for your family and if and how entrepreneurship.
You're with The Capitalist Sage, a twice-a-month podcast that seeks out entrepreneurs and experts that speak to the real-world life of doing business for their sage advice. Now, with your hosts, Karl Barham and Rico Figliolini.
Welcome to The Capitalist Sage podcast. We're here to bring you advice and tips from seasoned pros and experts to help you improve your business. I'm Karl Barham with Transworld Business Advisors of Atlanta Peachtree, and my co-host is Rico Figliolini with the Mighty Rockets Digital Marketing and the publisher of the Peachtree Corner magazine. Rico, how are you doing today?
Hey, Karl. Good. Excellent. Beautiful day outside. Nice and warm. Just the way I like it.
Excellent. Why don't you introduce our sponsor for today's podcast?
Sure. The sponsor of these family podcasts, this, including Peachtree Corners Life and Prime Lunchtime with the City Manager, is brought to you by Peachtree Corners magazine. And the latest issue is actually out now. Let me show you a copy of it. There you go. So the best of Peachtree Corners. There's over 30 categories, plus a lot of other articles in here that you should be picking up and looking at. It should be hitting mailboxes today. Otherwise, go to the nearest restaurant or other store within Peachtree Corners in the next few days, and you'll find copies there. Or actually go online at livingatpeachtreecorners.com and look at the digital edition that's there.
I saw my copy come in on the kitchen table this morning, so they're definitely getting out there. Another great magazine. I love all the different businesses and restaurants and stuff that were highlighted. There were some that I never saw before and definitely going to check out. Great edition.
Excellent. Thank you, Cole.
Today's guest is Tony Hill. He's an investor with Solutions Force, and we're here to talk about taking the leap into entrepreneurship, the top things that anybody should consider when they're ready to make that leap. Hey, Tony, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Karl. How are you?
Oh, we're doing well. As we get started, why don't we just quick introduction to yourself, tell folks a little about you.
Sure. So I am a native of upstate New York. Been in Atlanta now about 25 years via way of Maryland, where I went to school at Morgan State and obtained a industrial engineering degree. Took a transfer down here to corporate America in 96 and pretty much transplanted ever since. And my wife and I have two pretty much college-age kids, one in college, one on his way in 6 months. And we have owned some small family businesses for a while that she runs. That's what brings me here today.
Excellent. Taking this leap into entrepreneurship, I know we've been having conversations with a lot of people that have worked for various companies, for other folks. And now after these going into year 2 of the pandemic, folks are changing their priorities and thinking about taking a leap. And when we're having those conversations, there's a bunch of stuff that they're considering, and there's a bunch of stuff that they probably haven't thought about as they're going through that journey. So I wanted to chat a little bit about that today and start off with, what are some of the things when you were making that shift that you considered as helping you with the decision for you and your family to go down a more entrepreneurial path?
Sure. So we've been married about 22 years, and early on in our marriage, we both had entrepreneur interest. And so we started off pretty earlier in our marriage. So a couple things we did, and we've been, like I said, small business owners for some time now, 15 plus years. But one, we wanted to find a business that would work for our family and the things that were important for our family. So I think understanding that entrepreneurship is not a job, it's a lifestyle. And I think it's very important to assess what type of lifestyle you want for your family and if and how entrepreneurship will work or integrate into what you see as what you want, the type of lifestyle you want. So I think that's first and foremost. And I think you have to choose a space that allows you to blend those two. And I guess the summary point there is, for me, it's really important when people think about this. Entrepreneurship is not a job, it's a lifestyle.
I love that you highlighted that point. Very often when someone comes into our office and they're talking about acquiring a business or starting a franchise or starting a business of any type, they start with numbers. They say, I need to make this much money from the business, and I want this type of business with these types of things. And I always ask them to pause and consider holistically their life, where they are, the age of their kids. At different stages of life, you may have different demands on your time. What things are you passionate about? What things are you good at and have relevant experience in? And using all of that to factor into their decision on choosing that. Are there any things or resources that helped you think through that when you were going through that process that you think people should explore?
I agree with everything you said. And just as I get ready to answer that question, one way, and I don't know if we did this 15, 17 years ago, but starting a business is like having another child if you're a parent. And it's the equivalent to marrying your spouse. It's the same, to me, consideration and evaluation that you do when you're looking to marry your spouse and or have children is the same type of consideration I think you want to give to becoming an entrepreneur in the entrepreneur life. To answer your question more specifically, when I was in college in the early 90s, I was an RA. And as an RA, we were challenged to create programs around this model called wellness. And at the time, it was a 6-dimension wellness model. I think it's been evolved to 7 or 8. And so one of the things that I suggest entrepreneurs do is as they look at their wellness plan, their wellness model, look again how that would integrate into an entrepreneur lifestyle. So an example of that, when you look at the wellness model, there's, like I said, 6 to 8 dimensions, but one is emotional. As you know, Karl, being an entrepreneur is an emotional roller coaster. And I think you have to make sure you are prepared for that emotionally and you're tapped into your own emotional IQ and you understand the psychology, because as an entrepreneur, and particularly as a leader, not only do you need to be in tune with your own emotions, but I think you need that emotional IQ as it relates to potential partners and employees. And so that's one component of the dimensions of wellness that I think you have to make sure you're very mature and stable in before you launch into the entrepreneurial lifestyle. And so essentially what I suggest, Karl, is folks look at that wellness model and in each dimension of that wellness model, assess where you're at today as an individual and how that same dimension will be applied as an entrepreneur. And make sure you're prepared. And you may think you want to be an entrepreneur today. You said it's the first of the year. A lot of folks are thinking about it. But in my opinion, it may take you a year, it may take you a year and a half really to go through this model and truly prepare yourself emotionally, financially, physically. My wife, who runs our business, some of the hours I see her work, grace of God, she has to be able to withstand that. And so I'd go through all those dimensions and map them back to entrepreneurship. And I'd be happy to try to unpack that and share the rest of them as we go through the conversation. That's how I would recommend people start to frame their evaluation of the entrepreneurial lifestyle.
Let me ask you, Tony, is it the wellness is, like you said, you started out with 6 back in the 90s. It's, I think, up to 8 now. The various categories. They don't have to be equally important. You can even choose 1 or 2, I think, that you can weigh more on, as long as you're aware of it holistically in some of these areas, and that they shouldn't be ignored, like you said, right? Because they might tax you even further, especially if you're not aware of what you're doing. Because like Karl knows, I know, and you do, that when you own a business, it is a lifestyle. You live and breathe it. 7 days, 24 hours a day, paying your bills. It may be out of your home, it may be multiple locations, and someone doesn't want to be, let's say, like an Elon Musk necessarily, although who wouldn't want to be a billionaire? You don't want to be living on a plane going back and forth between 2 cities and 2 companies. So it's definitely something that people should be aware of. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I agree with your sentiments. You may not weight them all equally. One of the obviously ones that Karl can speak to is you have to have a financial infrastructure to even contemplate going into entrepreneurship. And so that one typically gets a lot of attention because it's front and obvious. But I also think it's equally important to not to take your eye off some of the other ones because, as you said, not only is it a lifestyle, but I think holistically, you have to be prepared. It's a marathon. And even though you don't weigh them all equally, I think they all need to have some level of attention so that you can have the sustained success that you want as an entrepreneur. One example, one of the dimensions of wellness is social culture. What I've seen very successful entrepreneurs do is they circle themselves, or they surround themselves, or the lunch tables that they show up with are other entrepreneurs. So they're getting some social, but they're also getting reinforced and sharpened in areas that will help them in their entrepreneurial life. The way I would frame it is look at all these dimensions and just try to say, how can I tie this into becoming a successful entrepreneur? In each one, there's a particular play that I think can be made for you to pursue those entrepreneurial interests.
I'd like to explore some of these dimensions a little bit further. One of them that I see as a pattern is something that I might generally call around purpose. People call mission, people call values, whatever that is. When folks are looking to become their own boss through entrepreneurship, yes, they want to generate an income to support their family. And you can get that from a job or investing or owning a business. They may want to build an asset that appreciates over time, builds value, builds wealth. But the industry you choose to be in and the type of business you choose to be in, it's probably really relevant to have what's your purpose in that business. Is there one dimension that kind of speaks to that, and just some of the thoughts that you think people should consider when thinking about matching their purpose and mission to their business choice?
Yeah, that's a great question, Karl. I'm not sure I would tie it to one dimension, but I will say a couple of thoughts on it. One, I think you're absolutely spot on. You need to have that. That North Star is critical for you as the entrepreneur, for you as the leader. And from the readings that I've seen, and I know my wife is spending time with, it's really important for employees now. I think particularly as we're in this resignation nation, people want their 8 hours a day to be more than a paycheck. And they want to know that they're supporting a mission that is not just doing well, but it's doing good. And so I think there's multiple layers of value in having what you referred to. I see it if I'm looking at this model from a spiritual perspective, and everyone brings their own spirit value to who they are. But for me as a Christian, the fruits of the Spirit are important. And those things are love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, patience, things of those natures. And I think, though that may not be the mission statement, if you can bake some of those values and characteristics into your business, I think it will come through your business and the way you interact and treat your stakeholders. And whether it's on a mission statement or not, and I know that's critical to have, but if you embrace those values into your culture, I believe that's what will come out from your culture. And people will see and appreciate that in the long term. Who you are as the entrepreneur and how your culture is evolved based on those values. So I don't know if I gave you a direct answer, Karl, as far as a mission statement and where it fits into a wellness model, but I absolutely think it's critical for multiple reasons.
I know our faith played a big role in what we did, and for a business, we've learned to consider it's not our business, it's God's business that we are the shepherds of, and folks may come from it from different perspective, but it informs the values and approaches that we use and how we conduct and how we can serve both the community and clients and others within that. But getting that alignment, what I find it does, I don't feel like I go into work every day. I'm working and I'm doing the things that I would be doing, whatever I was doing. And if you can get that alignment between what you're doing in your business and its purpose, or whether it's faith-driven or others, I think that helps people through the ups and downs that you will be experiencing, especially early on in business. Rico, I wonder if I could, when I think about some of the stuff that, when I first moved into the Peachtree Corners area, I mentioned before that I found your podcast as one of the first things. And when we met and we talked about it, you said you did it because you didn't get paid to do it. You just did it. There's something in doing that helped you live your passion and do it. Can you share a little bit about just the work that you do and how it aligns to
Well,
your business?
sure. So I like giving back. I like being a cheerleader for other people, if you will. The reason that podcast started some years back was also because there was wrong information online and stuff and some neighborhood apps and things. So I wanted to be able to put out the right information for people to say. Some people go golfing and do other things. This is what I do. I do a podcast. I do 2-3 times a month. This ended up expanding, right, to having this podcast twice a month, to having the city manager podcast once a month. On occasion, I get good sponsors that come on board for a year or two, and that's fine. That pays the bills, the cost of doing this stuff and the time and such. But I think it feeds into what I like to do, which is publishing. I like content. I like being able to share, whether it's print or digital, being able to put out that information in a way that people can consume it, because people like to consume their stuff differently, right? Whether it's audio, video, or print. So I think it helps feed the rest of what I'm doing. And long term, the first 3 years, I had no sponsor. But after that, I started getting really good sponsors that understood that they wanted to support the community, good journalism and all that. So it's worked out well, I think. And it feeds my passion too. So it makes me happy to know other people and to help tell their story too. So it's a good thing.
Absolutely. And it makes it the service you provide. When people think about the businesses they're going into, think about how they're helping their clients, their community, and others is a factor. If I could shift to a dimension that most people will talk about.
Hey, Karl, can I just book in what Rico said just to share? I totally agree with him, and I feel a lot of the same sentiments. Rico, one of the books on my book list, and you may have read it or heard of it, but I think it frames out what you shared a little bit, is Getting to Halftime. And it talks about going from success to significance. And though I haven't read the book, the way I interpret significance is really helping out others beyond yourself. And so whatever that's worth, it's on my list, and I'm excited to get to halftime.
I think the people that give back without a selfishness, we're not all saints, but I think that if you try to do that, it does come back well enough for you, I think, in life. It's a good thing to be able to do. If that drives, your passion is driven in that part, then the business part will excel even further, I think.
So another dimension when folks are considering how to be ready to take that leap, and they get their passion aligned and then they have purpose and focus, there's some things I think they need in their tool belt to equip them to be successful as entrepreneurship. And maybe the first one starts around doing that self-assessment of their financials. Anything you've learned along your journey to help people, how do they assess when they're ready? What are some of the considerations that they need to consider when they're taking that leap?
So absolutely the financials. And for us, my wife runs our businesses, so I stayed in corporate a lot longer. And for us, I became the breadwinner on the corporate side. And that gave her some latitude to really get the foundation and the infrastructure and the footing for the businesses to be successful. That's one thing. Like you said, you got to think about the financials. We talked about the emotional, the physical, the spiritual. But also, I think the truth of the matter is I don't think entrepreneurship is for everybody. And I think as you're approaching it, you have to make sure everyone's on the same page, stakeholders, pre-call, we talked about a situation. So you have to go into it with your partner at a minimum, your life partner, your business partner, your spouse on the same page. And I don't think you can undercut the importance of preparation and preparing, working to get on the same page, because it is going to be in a roller coaster that will test you, will test your marriage. It will test you in every way possible. Looking back 15 plus years, we did a little pre-planning, but never enough. And so I would encourage folks to look at all those aspects, do the hard work up front, and realize it's more than the hype of being an entrepreneur. The things I see my wife go through, it's more than the social media and the business card and all the glitz and glamour and, hey, I work for myself and all that stuff sounds real cool. But that's about 2% of it, just really being prepared for the journey. And I'll say it, if you do the work and you're diligent, once you get to the other side, I don't think you'll regret it. but you just need to go in with your eyes wide open. And that's, I think, the way I would suggest people prepare. I hope I'm answering your question direct enough, Karl.
You are, and if I could add to that, one of the things that I think is a tool is to do a personal financial statement. And if folks don't know what that is, if you have a financial planner, they can help you with that. You can go online, there's resources there, but it's simply stating all of your assets, all of your liabilities, and coming up with your net worth. Lots of different ways to generate capital to invest in a business, but it's probably going to come from personal savings that you have. And a good test is, have you been disciplined enough over enough time to generate that initial capital, invest in your own equity, that you can go into an endeavor? Now, for some people, it's easy. They made a great living. They saved lots of money. They got stocks, bonds. It's fine. They've got the money. They've done the discipline to that. But for others, you may not have all the money that you think you need to start it. But that's when putting together a budget, getting disciplined so you could save enough. In the first year, many entrepreneurs don't pay themselves much or anything in the first. So having a year's worth of expenses saved away to take care of your family, and or having other sources of income, whether one spouse works and the other one takes the leap, are important factors to talk to with your advisors before going there. And I'll mention one more point. There's a misnomer or myth out there that to start a business, I can go to the bank or go get an SBA loan or something. What they do not say in popular media, which I wish they did, is a bank is uncomfortable loaning someone money that doesn't have money. So if they go to apply for a loan for $1 million, the bank wants to see that you probably have assets approaching $1 million. It makes sense. It gives them security around that. It's very infrequent that a bank would lend someone $1 million and their net worth is $10,000. You're extremely high risk.
I think that people think that because it's an SBA loan and that the government, guarantees like 80% of that loan or something like that?
It's less than 20%, but
less than 20. Wow.
They guarantee less than 20. The lender takes the bulk, and they typically will ask for 10% to 20% equity from the seller as well.
There you go. I think the worst part is, even if they understand all that, is that they may not understand. Like you said, usually people don't draw from the business the first 12 months, the first year. I've seen people go into business, open up a place, and think they can shoestring their operating budget and get through it. And it doesn't work, because the minute you hit that bad bump in the road, which will happen, the unexpected, that's when the whole thing falls apart after 6-8 months. I mean, it's a shame, I think.
Yeah, and Rico, the thing I'd add on to it, Karl, you broke it down in technical terms, and it took me some time to come to this realization. To me, the bank is just a bunch of other individuals, and you got to look at it from their perspective. Would you lend yourself money? Would you lend yourself $1 million if you only had $2,000 in the bank? So I think if you just take on that perspective, if I had to go, would I give it to that person? And if you wouldn't, then you got to evaluate yourself, maybe go through this model and build yourself up. Not to be discouraging, but just to understand. A lot of times it's not personal. They're just saying, is this individual a good financial bet? And if you come to the table with 10,000 asking for $1 million, on the surface, that doesn't seem like a good bet. And so I would just think about it that way. The other thing I would add, Rico, if I'm allowed to mention books, because Karl made me think of one called The Myth. I think the classic, the E-Myth, is if you're thinking about entrepreneurs, spend some time, and there's a variety of tons of books out there, thousands, 100 million. But to me, the E-Myth is a classic. It frames it in a very simplistic way. And the E stands for the entrepreneurial myth. And it's a series of books now, but if you get one of the original ones and you spend some time with that, I think it will help you understand this mindset that will get you to the lifestyle that we're talking about here.
I'll mention something, as you mentioned, the E-Myth, and just for folks, Cliff Notes for folks, it talks about strategies that successful business owners have figured out to help them build and scale their business, and involves putting in systems and developing teams and other things that people don't think. And the reason that's so important, I often will see when people are looking at taking an entrepreneurial jump, they don't understand the difference between being what I call self-employed and the owner of a business. And on simplistic terms, self-employed is someone that creates a business, an LLC or a corp, and they are the person that generates the revenues and income of the business. A classic example you may say is simply as a doctor. If the doctor owns a practice and he sees all the patient, that person, if you take that doctor out of that practice, they can't service customers, they can't make money. And so it's just replacing working for someone else to working for yourself, but that's not very scalable because it's all built around you as an individual making the money. When you're thinking about starting a business, if you're thinking more of an investor's approach to it in business, the difference is in the beginning, they might be the one generating the income, their work and hard labor. Over time, they evolve into being the executive running the processes, the management team to run the business. So they're not directly involved in the day-to-day generation of cash flow in the business. They're more of, they own the company, they set the direction for it. They have systems and teams in place to generate the business. In going into that leap, one of them, without you working really, really hard, if you want to double your revenue, you got to work twice as hard. If you're an investor, to double your revenue, you don't actually have to work twice as hard to do that. And those businesses tend to be more valuable over time. So there's a lot of folks out there starting businesses in the services sector where it's just dependent on them to generate the revenue. I think it's an important consideration what type of business you want. They both have pros and cons and different headaches. None is better than the other, but you should be intentional in your choice. Are you buying a business that can scale? And what are the types of industries and businesses that can do that? Or are you buying a business that might just serve your lifestyle, generate an income to make you comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And just not to be discouraging, I think people may realize it's a journey. You may start out, like you said, Karl, in one situation with the aspirations of getting to another. And I say you own a business is if you can go away, if you can walk away from the business, or if you can go abroad or whatever, not be involved in that business, still produce a good return, then you own a business, as opposed to solo entrepreneurship. And like you said, one is not better than the other. But I think as you're doing that prep work, getting familiar with these different concepts and planning accordingly to create that life that you want is the critical piece to it.
I volunteer with an organization called Start Me, and they help entrepreneurs in underserved communities help learn how to start a business. And it pairs up mentors with entrepreneurs. And one of the sayings that's often used there that entrepreneurship is a team sport. And so as you looked at along your journey and when you took the leap, how do you build that team and that support team for entrepreneurs? Because being a boss or CEO can be very lonely position to be in for a lot of people.
Yeah. So what I recommend in that regard is, like I mentioned before, being very intentional about surrounding yourself and being in the right organizations. And so there's a lot of different organizations out there. If appropriate, I can share some of the names, but there's entrepreneur organizations designed for other entrepreneurs so that you're sitting at the table with folks that are going through the same journey that you're going through. They can commemorate with you. They can do experience share with you. They can talk about the challenges they're having. And I think that is vitally important because entrepreneurship is lonely, and your loved ones and your families and your friends, as much as they love you and you love them, if they don't have those experiences, there's limits to how much they can understand and support you as an entrepreneur.
Feel free to share. Can you give examples of organizations that you've seen out there?
Absolutely. One is called, there's a lot of them, but I just rattle off a handful. YPO, Young Presidents Organization. That's one is probably for more senior, larger enterprises, the owners of that. They have I think a spinoff of that, which I think is awesome, called the Entrepreneur Organization, EO, all this stuff you can Google, Entrepreneur Organization, worldwide organization, chapters in most metropolitans. And within EO, they have probably one or two, perhaps three different levels that you can kind of come in. Some are kind of in the startup phase. below $1 million. Some then there's another level where you have north of $1 million in revenues and, say 10 employees. So there's different levels. I think there's an organization called Vista, if I'm saying it properly, which is similar to EO and YPO. It happens to be a Christian-based one. I know my wife is affiliated with some that are women-only entrepreneurs. Off the top of my head, those are some that come to mind. Additionally, there's always organizations like your local chambers, your county chamber, your city chamber. I know in Georgia there's Georgia State Chamber. Those are going to get you around other entrepreneurs. And then there's business leagues. And so I think with a little effort and a little diligence on your part, you will find various communities wherever you're at that you can plug into with other folks like you. And when you're an entrepreneur, I can tell you from seeing my wife's journey, you're going to be under time and perhaps under resources. And the last thing you might say is, I have no time or desire to go do this thing over here. I got to go make P&L. But my experience from the successful entrepreneurs I know is it's worth the time. It may seem like you don't have the time to give up to plug into those organizations, but the people I've seen be successful, the value they got back from plugging into the right organizations justified the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that people get caught up in doing the work, maybe, and the schedule of that work and the overwhelmingness of that work, maybe. And sometimes you have to decompress and just be with people that you can say that can share that same relationship, whether it's, like you said, it's a chamber, or even if it's, for example, the Georgia Hispanic Business Chamber, because even culturally, sometimes there are things that you're going through that maybe you want to be around similar people that share the understanding of that stress, because it's a cultural stress over business and stuff like that. So there's a variety of ways to be able to reach out and talk to different people. So
I absolutely agree. Yeah, and I'm familiar with that chamber, and they're awesome. And you're right. So all those things exist. I know there's ABN, and so you just got to do a little research in your area, and I think with a little effort, you'd be surprised the amount of resources out there. Some are peer-to-peer, some are professionally led. There's different flavors to spin to them. But the key, I think, is being around other like-minded folks that have the same aspiration and the same entrepreneurial desires that you have.
Yeah.
I think you're hitting on something that people can do before they take that leap. Start visiting these organizations, chambers, meeting other entrepreneurs. They'll tell you the truth of what it's like. They'll tell you the joys and how they're able to help in their communities and the mentors that they build. And that's why this concept around entrepreneurship being a team sport, not only is it you and your team in the business. When we think of team, we think about mentors and allies that can come, that have experience, that might get you that introduction for that big client that you might need one day. And likewise, paying it forward. As you become more experienced, there's someone that's going to be following you starting and helping share some of your learnings and experience with them, which I'm glad, Tony, today you've been able to share with us. I'll add one other resource that's out there, a type of resource, and there are coaches. Business coaches. Now, a lot of people carry that title as a business coach, but a good business coach not only has some expertise in various aspects of business, but they're a sounding board. They're the people to walk you off the ledge or hold you accountable for goals that you set. So exploring business coaches, there's various organizations and companies that do that, but sometimes it could just be someone that's successful that takes you under their wings and explains to you how to set up your financials so you can make an acquisition in the future, or how to deploy a recruiting and onboarding system and work with payroll and understand those rules. These coaches can play a role in the success of a business leader. If I were to ask you one last thing, if someone's considering taking a leap that they really should sit hard and think about, what would that be that we may not have covered already?
I think I would reinforce what I mentioned up front. It's a lifestyle. I equate it to having a child or choosing your spouse. And you want to, I think, be extremely diligent. I would say, don't look at it for the sizzle, look at it for the substance. I think there's so much on social media, et cetera, that people get sideways. So just understand it's a real undertaking if you're serious about it. Be diligent and realize it's a journey. no disrespect, but it's not the Kardashian model. You're not going to be a gazillionaire tomorrow. So go in it with the understanding that, I might be in prep mode for a year, and I'm okay with that. And as Rico mentioned, when I do launch, my business might not pay me for 18 months. And I'm okay with that because I have a bigger goal and picture in mind long term. And I just think you got to be very honest with yourself, very diligent. We talked about, for me, the 6 to 8 dimensions of wellness, going through each one of those dimensions and saying where I'm at today, where do I want to be, and how will this tie into my entrepreneurial journey would be the things that I would suggest people be extremely diligent about.
Rico, I'd love to get your insight on that. If you were to somebody come up to you and said, I'm gonna start a business, what would you share with them that they should really consider before they take that leap?
Pretty much what we discussed here. Do you have the money for it? Do you have the financial will to do what's necessary to last those 12 to 18 months? And do you have the background as far as family support to be able to do it? Because your wife's going to get tired of you talking about the business if she's not part of it. And even if she's part of it and you're talking about it all day into the night after dinner when you get to bed, it's not going to be pretty. Your wife, your partner, whoever. I think those 3 things: money, support, and the willingness to do it. I just listened to a podcast about the founders of Goodreads, if you're familiar with that. That's a book review site that started out as a book sharing site. They spent 3-4 years before they were able to make any money themselves. And it was a husband-wife team, but they were both involved in it, and they both segmented their job responsibilities too. But it was a while before they were able to do any real money out of it. And if you can't do that, then maybe you need a 9-to-5 job, and that's okay. Everyone, there's more 9-to-5 people than there are entrepreneurs.
And you can transition over too, so it's not. It doesn't have to be a big jump. You can transition, you can prepare. So
that's right.
You can do some things in parallel.
I'll leave this topic with this thought. When I talk to folks, and there's all the risk and the fears and the unknowns, I like to leave people with this thought. Throughout history, business creation is probably one of the biggest drivers of wealth creation. You could have a job and invest, and you could do all these different things, but it's been shown historically, being an entrepreneur, creating a business, growing a business, being successful is one of the ways to generate generational wealth. And the reason it's important is not so much about the number that you are able to achieve in wealth and so on. It starts to shift when you see the people that are more successful on what you can do with both the wealth and the skills and networks, how you can impact those around you, whether it's through your faith, whether it's through community service, whether it's through very targeted, you want to attack an issue or solve a problem or create something new. It gives you the opportunity to do more when you're successful with it. So I always encourage people, if they prepare well, taking the leap and the risk is one of the best ways to really transform not only your life and your family's life, but your community and folks all around you. You see these business leaders doing that all the time. It's harder to do that as an employee very often. You can absolutely have impact, but becoming a successful business person just allows you so many different ways to impact your community. You know what? We could continue chatting about this all day, Tony, and I really appreciate you spending some time with us on the Capitalist Sage. I'd like to reintroduce Tony Hill. He's an investor with Solution Force. And thank you for chatting and sharing some of your insights on what it takes to take the leap into this entrepreneurial journey that many of us get to enjoy and many more people will in the months and years to come. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony.
I would say it was an honor and humbling to chat with you guys and share my thoughts. Karl, I'd like to give your listeners just some very tactical things. One, I mentioned, I would encourage folks to pick up Google the 6 or 8 dimensions of wellness and spend some time going through that chart. We mentioned the E-Myth. I think that's a phenomenal book to read for aspiring entrepreneurs. A classic that I read out of college that I still think is hard to beat is The 7 Habits of Successful People. So those are 2 or 3 things that I think are tangible that people can put their hands on. Because at the end of the day, as we talked about, you want to be overly diligent. You want to come up with a plan. You're obviously going to need a business plan. It's the financials that we've hit it on a couple of times. But know that if you want that lifestyle, it's obtainable. The information is out there. It's just really, are you willing to be focused and disciplined to go obtain it and execute? And when you do, like you said, Karl, the other side has some rewards that exceed money. You can focus on that wellness. You can focus on your health. You can focus on your family. You can focus on going from success to significance. And that you can't put a price tag on. And so I encourage everyone, wish them the best of luck. And I know you guys are some great resources for those on that journey.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much, Tony. Well, I'm Karl Barham with Transworld Business Advisors of Atlanta Peachtree. My passion and the team's passion is to help business owners be successful and when they're ready, exit their business. We love helping entrepreneurs find the right opportunity that fits them so that they could be successful. So if you're looking to improve, grow, or exit your business, you can contact and schedule a consult. I can be reached at kbarham@tworld.com, or you can visit our website, www.tworld.com/Atlanta Peachtree. Lots of tools in there for entrepreneurs to find opportunities, to get valuations on their business, to find businesses that they may want to invest in and take that leap into entrepreneurship. Hey, Rico, what do you got going on?
Sure. So we've put out the latest issue of Peachtree Corners magazine. If you want to find out a little bit more of that, or you want to reach this audience in the city of Peachtree Corners, just reach out to me. You could look at livinginpeachtreecorners.com or Google Rico Figliolini on LinkedIn. Feel free to get back to me when it comes to content, video, photography, and print and online. I'm the person that can help you. So yeah, there's that. It's hitting the mailboxes, and I'm already working on a second magazine launch. So hopefully that'll come to fruition by April, and I'll let you know more about that when I get to it.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of The Capitalist Sage with Tony Hill. And just out there, when you want to consider your options for the future, just know taking that leap into entrepreneurship is something that many people have done before, many people will do in the future. It's up to you to decide if it's the right fit for you and for your family and your goals. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Follow us on iTunes, YouTube, all the various streaming channels, and visit, what is the website where they can find?
The capitalistsage.podcast.com, or go to livinginpeachtreecorners.com and you'll see the Capitalist Sage tab right there.
Excellent.
And you can find all the places where you can get the audio podcast as well as the video podcast.
Excellent. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
This has been The Capitalist Sage with Karl Barham and Rico Figliolini, the twice-a-month podcast with entrepreneurs and business experts. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Want more? Visit our website at capitalistsagepodcast.com.